You are already paying for a problem you cannot see. You are paying for the gap between who you are in the rooms you already own and who you need to become in the rooms you have not yet entered. If you're operating at 7 and 8 figures and you're watching Spanish-speaking markets grow while your footprint stays locked inside English-speaking territories, you already feel this. You may call it timing. You may call it readiness. Some of you may even call it research. I'm going to name it precisely today because what you call it determines how long it costs you. The Harvard Business Review documents that 70% of international ventures fail due to cultural differences and miscommunication. How are you even going to speak to them if you don't know how to communicate with them in their language? From their culture, their cultural operating system. This is important, more important than the words you say. 70%. Not capital constraints, not product market fit, not operational execution. Culture, communication, identity. And the executives who survive that statistic, the 30% who actually break into new markets and hold ground, did not do it by working harder in the wrong frame. They did it by building the right architecture before they walked in the room. What I'm going to show you today is what the architecture already costs when it is missing and what it is worth when it is installed. My name is Miracle Omega Castle. I'm the founder of Nativersal and the architect of the Global Authority Protocol, a system designed to compress the timeline of global market entry for executives who already operate at elite levels and cannot afford to learn by failure. Today is about the gap. Let me name it clearly. Let me show you the scale of what is on the table before I show you what is blocking you accessing it. The Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, projects that Latin America's GDP will grow at 2.4%, and that was for 2025, building on a regional base of 6.76 trillion. That is not an emerging market in the early sense. That is a 6.76 trillion economic block growing through volatility that has stalled over other regions. The Spanish-speaking world is not a single market. It is a 20 plus sovereign markets. It is 20 plus sovereign markets, each with its own regulatory framework, cultural architecture, and relationship economy. The Spanish-speaking population globally exceeds 550 million native speakers and grows every year. That combined purchasing power of Spanish-speaking consumers in the United States alone represents one of the largest consumer economies on the whole planet. This is the room. And most of you executives who have already cracked 8 figures, who have built companies that work, who have navigated regulatory environments and investor demands, most of you are locked out of it. How can this be so? Not because the opportunity is not there. The opportunity is obvious. You are locked out because the entry infrastructure does not exist. The Economist Intelligence Unit surveyed global executives and found that 80% believe cultural misunderstanding can derail international ventures. 80% of people who make the decisions already know this. They can feel the friction. What they do not have is a systematic architecture to eliminate it. A system that was architected by the architect. That is the bottleneck. And it is not a small one. Let me walk you through what the bottleneck actually costs, not in vague terms, but in 4 specific places where revenue hemorrhages when a high-level executive tries to enter a Spanish-speaking market without the right architecture. Point 1, the relationship cost. The Spanish-speaking business world runs on relationship capital in ways the English-speaking markets do not require to the same degree. Trust is not built through decks and data rooms. It is built through presence, through shared context, through the ability to speak in the room. Not just about business, but about family, about the city, about the moment. The executive who cannot navigate this layer is not seen as underprepared. They are seen as untrustworthy. And who's going to do business with somebody that they don't trust? Only an untrustworthy person. This is not a bias. It is a real cultural architecture. And when you do not have it, deals stall. Partnerships dissolve into the ether. At the letter of intent stage, introductions that should become revenue become silence. You cannot see the cost on a balance sheet, but it is there. AIB Insights, the Academy of International Business, documents that up to 50% of international joint ventures fail due to, once again, cultural misunderstandings. Not due to bad deals, not due to economic conditions, cultural misunderstanding. The first cost is invisible, and it is massive. Point 2, the time cost. The traditional approach to global market entry: hire local consultants, take the language classes, spend 2 years building cultural context slowly through context. Absorbs time at the executive level that compounds in the wrong direction. International retailers pay per research published. International retailers, per research published in AIB Insights, absorb an average of 7 years of loss before they either exit a foreign market or find their footing. Do you have 7 years to lose? Do you have 7 years to gamble? 7 years. At the executive level, 7 years of incorrect positioning is not just a market delay. It is the window in which your competitor installs the infrastructure you were building and claims the relationship capital that you were earning. The time of slow transition is not a timeline problem. It is a compounding loss problem. Every quarter spent navigating cultural friction from inside the friction is a quarter you are not deploying leverage. You are not building. You are surviving a learning curve that should not exist at your level. Point 3, the identity cost. This one is the most expensive and least discussed. When a high-performing executive tries to enter a new cultural room and does not have the architecture, the language, the cultural fluency, the social intelligence, the reframed identity, they default to who they are in rooms they already own. But what works in those rooms is not going to work in a completely different world. It is not. They lead with credentials that do not translate. They pitch in frameworks that do not land. They show up as authority in a context that does not yet recognize their authority is even valid. You who? Who is you? That's what they're asking. The executive who walks in a Spanish-speaking boardroom as the same person they are in New York or London or Dubai, without the translation of identity that the room requires, does not just fail to close. They close the door behind them. This is very, very important, serious business. Because relationships at this level carry memory. The first impression in a relationship-first culture is not a trial run. It is the data point that lives for years and possibly forever. Harvard Business Review found that companies with high cultural intelligence see a 20% performance increase across international markets compared to those that do not invest in this infrastructure. 20%. At 8 figures, that is not a rounding error. Point 4, the intelligence cost. The fourth cost is strategic. It is dangerous at the decision-making level. Oh, this is not just inefficient. Let's backtrack. I skipped a paragraph. The fourth cost is strategic, the intelligence cost. When you do not have fluency, cultural or linguistic, you are operating on second-hand information. I trust my mother, but I would not trust her that much. You are operating on second-hand information. You are working through translators who translate words but not context. You are reading market signals filtered through intermediaries who have their own agenda, their own interpretation, their own compressed version of what actually happened on the ground. This is not just inefficient. It is dangerous at the decision-making level. Executives navigating Latin American markets without direct cultural intelligence are not just slower. They are making decisions with structurally incomplete data. The nuance that lives inside language, the word choice that signals class, the greeting that signals respect, the timing that signals integrity, none of it reaches them intact. The bottleneck is not one cost. It is 4 costs, compounding simultaneously. And you are far too competent to have it compound against you. And they all share the same root: missing architecture. Let me show you what that looks like in a real scenario. Consider the executive, I will not name them here, who had built a $40 million business in the U.S. market and identified a clear expansion opportunity in Mexico and Colombia. The market analysis was sound. It made sense on the data points. The product fit was real. The capital was available. What was missing was the room. They spent 2 years working through intermediaries, 2 years of deals that almost closed, 2 years of partnerships that dissolved at the last stage, 2 years of market intelligence that arrived weeks late and slightly wrong. At the end of year 2, a competitor with a fraction of the resources, but with the cultural and linguistic architecture already installed, had taken the dominant position in both markets. The cost was not the capital spent. The cost was the market position that is now someone else's. That is the $30 million bottleneck. Named precisely. Here's what it actually looks like. When the architecture is installed, when the identity transition happens before the market entry begins, the picture looks different in every dimension. The relationship capital builds in months, not years, because the executive can be presence, identity, in the room the way that the room requires. Not performing fluency, actually fluent. Not reading from a cultural briefing, operating from cultural intelligence, operating from a culture rightly embodied. Once it's a part of you, who can take it from you? The deal cycle compresses. The trust signal lands correctly. The introductions that were supposed to become revenue become revenue. The intelligence loop closes. The executive no longer depends on intermediaries for context. They read the room directly. They hear the conversation beneath the words. They know when a yes is a real yes and when it is a polite no. The identity holds under pressure. When negotiations get tense, and in high-stakes global deals, they always get tense. The executive can hold authority in two cultural registers simultaneously. The executive who can hold authority in two cultural registers simultaneously does not revert. They do not lose the room. They expand it. ECLAC's data shows Latin America's economy trajectory continuing upward, even as other regions face structural headwinds. The window for positioning is not infinite. The executives who install the window for positioning is not infinite. The executives who install the infrastructure now enter into a growing market with compounding relationship equity, one of the most significant equities that money cannot buy. Money will not get you into that. The executives who wait enter into a market that has already sorted itself out. The difference between these two groups is not vision. Both groups have vision. The difference is architecture. One group has it, one group does not. What I have described today is not a new problem. Every executive navigating global expansion has felt some version of this friction. The question is not whether or not the bottleneck exists. It does. The question is whether you install the architecture now, in months, systematically, with a protocol designed specifically for leaders operating at your level, or whether you learn it the slow way over years of costly friction. The Global Authority Protocol is the infrastructure solution I built for this exact situation. It is a $50,000 system designed for executives who are already operating at elite levels and need to transition into Spanish-speaking global markets with speed, authority, zero identity compromise, only only adding depth to the identity. Because we're not singular beings. But that's not for this conversation. It installs the cultural and linguistic fluency. It is the operating system of a native. It rebuilds the executive's identity for the new room. And when I say rebuild, I don't mean that we're going to scrap the old you. I'm saying we're going to add depth to who you are in ways that you probably didn't think were possible. I work with a small number of executives at a time. Very, very small. The engagement is intense and it is specific. This is not a course. This is a transformation. This is not coaching. It is an identity and architecture installation for people who are serious about the next room. The conversation starts with a qualifying call where I determine whether your situation is one we can actually move. Not every executive who reaches out is ready. Not every situation is the right fit. I take the determination seriously. If what I have described today maps onto the transition you are currently navigating, if you recognize yourself in the bottleneck, if you felt the cost in a very specific way, you know how to reach me. It'll be in the description of this video. Nativersal. This protocol is not for everyone, but if it is for you, you already know. Keep it organic, keep expanding. Let's make this happen. Love y'all.